And one of the things that you highlighted, right? So you guys said that you do 30 minutes, recap that 22. That's kind of your fall test, right? That's your fall, kind of gauge of fitness, of progress. And I think that's one of the things that I think is huge for athletes. And we probably could even started with. It's like when you're fine tuning your goals, like, and again, we're going to speak in our language, which is the ERG, right? We'll kind of stick to that here now that we already talked about the balance piece, right? But we'll talk a little bit about the ERG, right? Which is going to be, regardless of what program you're running for, it's going to be an important piece of what you're doing in the fall. And some of the things that you can do is, okay, like what is that fall piece that you guys will be doing on a consistent basis to measure fitness and in many ways probably make boat selections and things like that out of come fall racing, right? Head of the Schuylkill if you're in Philly, or head of the Charles, or any of these other fall regattas. Like what are coaches going to be looking at predominantly? And I'm pretty confident it's not the 2K. But is it something that is in that 15 to 30 minutes type range that you guys are going to be doing on a consistent basis? And we're going to circle around to the 2K piece here because I do have a question for you regarding that. But in regards to, for 95% of the high school athletes out there, especially if you are a rising junior or below, like if you're on the ERG, it doesn't need to be high intensity. But what it can be, and probably should be, especially if you're someone who does appreciate the ERG, then what it can be is something based around the ERG test that you're going to be seeing most frequently in the fall, which is probably something like a 30-minute test, whether it's at 22 or 24 or some kind of rate structure. For some of you, it may be a 6K test. For a lot of you, and I'm speaking more to high school athletes, it's probably a 5K test for a really large portion of you. For some, it could even be a 4K test, but it's probably something in that 15 to 30-minute type range, which to me, I think is 12-month a year kind of appropriate, right? Like you can train you can train for 30-minute testing 12 months a year, and it's probably not going to burn you physiologically too much, right? Like it's a longer endurance-based test that you can kind of train around, meaning doing a lot of stuff that is, 40 to 60 to 80 minutes and then working your way down to assess a 30-minute or 6K every once in a while. Like, I don't think you're really positioning yourself to, overtrain because you're doing that, right? Versus a 2K where the intensity is so high, like you probably need a natural step back from 2K intensity. Like 30-minute, 5K, 6K, like you can base a lot of your structure around that. And then now, and this is the way that we structure the summer training program, like it's okay, like we centered around 20-minute-ish 5K type work, because I know that those athletes in September, October, and November are going to be prioritizing 20-minute type work, 6K, 5K, 4K. Okay, well now if you're thinking about your summer in June, July, and August, and you need something that is measurable and repeatable for each of those months, can you incorporate a rate structured test each of those months to just get exposure to that distance and start to craft your training around that, right? Where it's like, hey, maybe I'm doing some prep work and then I'm doing a rate capped, 5K in the middle of July just to get a number. Doesn't have to be open rate, because very quickly when you try to do an open rate piece, right, you get 2 or 3K in and you're like, oh, why am I doing this? And then it again, just being a human, like it might not go the way that you anticipated, but you can probably do something that is 20 to 24, rate shifting, this and that, and get a complete 5K type assessment. And then you can repeat it again at the beginning of August. And then you can repeat it again at the end of August before you head to campus. And now in your summer, like what you said, you now have three or four assessments that or just good hard ergs that are centered around what you're going to be doing in the fall. And then tell me you're not confident for that first test come September. No, like you are, like you're ready to rock and roll, right? So I think that's an important piece, where it's like, hey, like athletes who are like, again, like to me, that's 12-month a year training. You can incorporate that stuff any time of year because it's not going to physiologically crush you and overtrain you or over whatever. Like it's just, you can do that stuff all throughout the year. So again, I think creating those benchmarks is a really helpful thing. My next question in alignment with that, and again, I just want to touch it because again, I think this is a common one for a lot of athletes, because the piece I want to talk about next is more like the, how do athletes kind of keep the motivation and keep keep, training if they don't have a group, whatever it may be. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But for the athletes, you're a college coach. For the athletes who are 100% centered on, hey, I'm told that I need to do a 2K, to get a score because offers go out in September or October, and they say that I am 8 seconds off and I need to do this or that, which I'm going to take a little bit of that before as you process your answer to that. But like, again, what would you say to those athletes? But to me, like, again, like, I think it's a piece of what we do as athletes, right? Again, 2K is going to be the area that a lot of coaches are looking for in the summer. Unless you're a rising senior and you are deep into recruiting conversations, meaning like coaches have given you a really specific target and goal and timeline, I don't believe that needs to be the centerpiece of your training. However, there are athletes who they have been giving very measurable targets to hit throughout the summer, which again, to me, my belief is I wish more college coaches would highlight 5K, 6K and stuff like that, so that athletes can do something that's a little bit more in alignment with their actual training, or with their program's training. But that's a whole separate podcast. But my question for you, Delaney, is okay, for those athletes, because I'm sure you're having those conversations with some athletes as well, where it's like, hey, like, this is the score that we're looking for. Like, are there alternatives that athletes can look at? Are there conversations that they can have with coaches or other ERG scores that they can send them? Or if they are being held to the fire with just a 2K test and they don't have a training environment that they can leverage to help get them to that goal, is there a way to set those athletes up for success to maybe try to make a step forward in their 2K scores?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's being upfront with college coaches. I don't know a college coach that wouldn't say, hey, that's great, to a high school athlete who says, hey, coach, like, I know that you want my 2K score to come down to X by September. I'm really focusing on, my aerobic training this summer. We're testing 5K when we get back. And, can I send you my 5K score? Can I send you my 20-minute score? My answer is yes, right away. To be honest, I'd probably be more impressed by the maturity and patience of the high school athlete to understand like the bigger process that's going on, and understand that if I pull a solid 5K, a solid 20-minute, even a solid 4K, every college coach knows how to compute that to what more likely your 2K score is going to be eventually, right? Like, it's going to give us a ballpark of like, okay, if your aerobic fitness is here on 5K, your 2K is going to be in a certain range, probably. But I think it's the maturity side of it is even bigger for me, to have an athlete who says, I'm not going to listen to the noise of like 2K, because, they might be hearing it from college coaches. But again, I think it's also, it's on us as college coaches to be, more specific that, I'd like to see your 2K here. However, there are other measures that can tell me that it's getting there if you're not training for 2K specifically right now. Like I said, we're going to understand if you say I'm training for 5K. But I think high school athletes, they get caught in the noise of like 2K score. They hear their teammates are talking about it. Their high school coaches are talking about it. Maybe even, I know you don't talk about it, but sometimes, they're talking to strength and conditioning coaches or people who are helping them with their recruiting who are talking about, well, you got to test your 2K. Their parents are talking about their 2K. So that's all they're hearing. And so for me, the maturity side of it would be so huge in the recruiting process to know that, wow, I'm talking to a kid that really understands the bigger picture of training. And that would probably incline me to even want that athlete more, because guess what we do in college? 6K, 30-minute, like, we're not testing 2K in September. and we're not talking about it over the summer. So you're going to be better prepared, for the next step if you can understand the bigger picture of how the training cycle all connects together. A fast 5K is going to put out a fast 2K at some point. The 2K test can take some refinement, a little bit more than maybe a 5K can, but you'll get there. If your aerobic fitness is in the range for the 2K score you want, you'll get there. Like, it just might take a little bit of refinement.